It was 1939. Adolf Hitler was on a mission to conquer the world. In just some swift and aggressive stabs, he left people at their wits' end. It seemed as though there was no stopping Hitler and the powerful German army. But exactly 6 years later, in 1945, Germany lay in ruin and Hitler's dream lay shattered. So what had gone wrong? How had it happened that Hitler, of all his power and resources, lost so ruinously? The Germans' Operation Barbarossa, launched in June 1941, called for millions of troops to be deployed on the soil of the Soviet Union. Initially, they would move swiftly forward, but Hitler failed to prepare for the Russian winter and was taken aback by the Soviet people's determination to survive. When the merciless winter finally crept in, German army was not so well prepared with appropriate clothing to deal with the extreme cold of the very biting atmosphere that received them. The scenario that existed was more or less like Napoleon's failed invasion of Russia, and also akin to Adolf Hitler, as their fate was fatal. He directed his army to defend in the Soviet Union, to the east, and to fight against the Allies in Europe at the west. Thus, it stretched Germans' resources up to breaking points, hence leaving their defenses weak and burdening the army. Fighting on two fronts required a fundamental width of strength and resources, something which Germany could not do. Economically, Germany was relatively weak compared to the Allies. Germany had no colonies like the United States, and hence derived all their resources from this country, leading to the fact that in terms of production, the tanks, airplanes, and the ammunition developed much slower in Germany compared to the Allies. For example, US alone produced more oil than the total production by Germany and Japan. This shortage of oil crippled the German war machine, as less oil made it really difficult to produce for Germany because it could not sustain the Allies. This bombing campaign of the Allies was so severe that it left German cities and factories in rubble. In 1944 alone, the Allies dropped 1.6 million tons of bombs on Germany. These bombings destroyed not only the industrial capacity of Germany but also broke the civilian morale, which increasingly began to antagonize the Germans against the war. In addition, an efficient crack in the German Enigma code would enable them to intercept and decode the plans sent ahead by the Germans. This emerged to give the Allies a huge advantage. At the same time, the US developed the atomic bomb through the Manhattan Project, giving psychological and technological pressure on Germany. With limited resources and technological setbacks, Germany could not keep up with such rapidly emerging Allied developments. As the years went by, Hitler began to take the advice and suggestions of his generals and start making military decisions on his own. His commanders were getting angry at Hitler because Hitler did not understand the ground realities. He also felt himself to be racially superior, where he ill-treated people in the Soviet Union who may have at least supported Germany when they entered. This further depleted his resources of men and supplies. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, the US joined the war. Such an incident was a further boost to the powers of the Allies with much strength because, by 1944, the US was producing half of the world's weapons, much to the help of Allied forces. The other significant factor, had it been incorporated, could have altered the events of the timeline, and that was the invasion of Normandy on D-Day in 1944, where more than 156,000 troops were landed into the French shores, thus putting the control of the region of Western Europe into the hands of the Allies. The two states were also trying to capture North Africa, an attempt that was frustrated by the Allied campaigns, proved to be a strategic defeat. Further opening the door to Italy to the invasion by the Allies. It was in September 1943 that Germany had to pour more troops into Italy, which further depleted both its eastern and western fronts. Basically, German civilians were always put to the mercy of air raids, food shortages, and a constant flood of depressing news. Eventually, with time, people started losing confidence in Hitler, and public criticism began to surface. Resistance movements that had the White Rose Group and many others started cropping up and rebelling from within Germany. Though insignificant, they too added to the growing disappointment of the German society over time. It was a mix of circumstances that made him lose the battle: own strategic mistakes, shortages of resources, and the superior coordination of his opponents. But it just goes to show that when the countries get together for a common cause, they can overcome even the most formidable threats. In the end, World War II teaches us that the misuse of power inevitably leads to dire consequences.